What is up, fam? Thank you so much for tuning in to So Real Sports Talk this fine Sunday before the Warriors are actually going to tip off for a redeem game in game 2 of the NBA Finals. I got my little brother here, Rohan Chakraborty, and before we get ready for NBA action, I thought we'd talk a little bit of 49ers, Rohan. How have you been since the last time I talked to you, which was Friday? Anything big happen?
No, it was a fun time. I got to go to the 49ers stadium yesterday. Enjoyed my time there with this 49ers event that the foundation put on. And it's been a pretty chill weekend. How are you?
Yeah, man, no complaints. Obviously, not too much craziness going on with new football news and stuff, but a lot of boxing been going on and soccer and basketball. So it's a fun sports weekend, but definitely looking forward to NFL starting here and training camp. In a couple of weeks, but. Before we get into that, I wanted to talk about obviously the biggest news of the week was the retiring of Alex Mack. And immediately people are going into, and us too, like, what is the solution there? But before we actually get into what are the solutions for Alex Mack, I wanted you to talk a little bit about why Alex Mack was so important to the 49ers and how big of a loss you actually think his retirement is for the 49ers as far as what he brought to the position and how he was able to perform for the 49ers last season.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I'll say this first before we talk about his play. We got to talk about his leadership. There's a reason the 49ers wanted to get a veteran center of Alex Mack's caliber back when they were competing. I think what was it, 2020 offseason or 2021? Following the 2020 season, ahead of 2021. They got a very solid year out of Alex Mack. What they're losing is a potential Pro Bowler. He was a Pro Bowl alternate last year alongside Laken Tomlinson. And at his age 36 season, I think that's fairly impressive. Additionally, he had huge familiarity with the scheme, played with Kyle Shanahan in Atlanta, reunited with him here in San Francisco. So the adjustment period it wasn't as big of a problem. And the entire offensive line really raved about him, right? I'm sure he would have been very helpful to Trey Lance had he started this year. But apart from the sweat issues that he had, the majority of Alex Mack was just a positive experience. He had a couple of rough games. Let's not like sugarcoat it, right? He had a couple of rough games, but for a majority of the time, especially in that second half of the season, I think there was a stretch where he really didn't allow many pressures, many sacks, which was fairly impressive. I think it was a 4-game stretch without a pressure. Very impressive, especially given the caliber of opponents the 49ers went against. So you're losing a leader, a veteran presence in that locker room, but also a player who could play at a Pro Bowl level like he showed last year.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was close to like 1,080 snaps all season. In all season last year, he only allowed 2 sacks, which is incredible numbers. And he did have beginning of the season, he was getting pushed around a little bit more than later on in the season. But his ability to understand the system, be able to make those calls or those changes and audibles at the line of scrimmage kind of makes it easier for a quarterback play, right? Especially with Trey Lance going to be the starter. This is his first year full-time starting. A guy like Alex Mack definitely would have made his job a lot easier, being able to do audibles at the line of scrimmage, call out reads and things of that nature. Now, it may be all in the hands of Trey Lance to be able to do all of that, which adds an extra layer of, something he has to think about, which can make the job a little bit tougher. But knowing what that loss is and how important it is to the 49ers, I mean, you look at it, you kind of mentioned it too. Last year, they had Daniel Brunskill there for half the season at center, even though he played, pretty decent, I guess you could say, as far as the amount of pressures and the sacks that he allowed in that time frame. Clearly, they didn't think he was the solution because they went out and got Alex Mack the next year to replace that. So, how do you think they can make up for that loss? Is it something that a guy like Brendel or Brunskill can come in and play well enough to, I guess, anchor that position, or is this kind of like a something by committee that needs to be done to replace what they're losing in Alex Mack.
Yeah, I honestly don't think you can really replicate his production with a certain player that's available right now, right? When we talk about it, who are the available options? We talked about Brendel, we talked about Brunskill, and then JC Treader. But the value, not only the play, but the value that Alex Mack brings, I don't think any of those single-handedly can cover the value that Alex Mack brings. So really, it's not necessarily trying to replicate what he did, but trying to trying to minimize the amount of damage that this could happen in terms of relationship with Trey Lance, in terms of continuity with the offensive line, and things like that. So I think that that's important. That you make sure that your quarterback is comfortable with whatever option you go for. So how can they make up for his loss? I think they've started that, right? You started already with Jake Brendel with the first team this past OTA period, right? Jake Brendel has been practicing with the ones. Daniel Brunskill is out with tendonitis, knee tendonitis, and really a lot of people didn't like Daniel Brunskill at center back in 2020. I think honestly Daniel Brunskill is capable of playing center. I saw a nice thread from Rich Madrid today showing clips against very talented defensive tackles and Kenny Clark, Aaron Donald, and players like that, where Brunskill was able to hold up. I think if Brunskill gets the entire season at a position rather than switching halfway through the year and is able to develop continuity with is able to develop continuity with the offensive line, I think that he'd also fare well at the position. I know we touched on the subject on who I believe could start for the 49ers, but I do believe that regardless, just the relationship and the rapport with Trey Lance is important.
Yeah, I mean, I know you're leaning more to Brendel just because of how much they've worked together. I mean, just to list off some numbers, because of the people that are on the roster right now, the only person that we've actually seen play center for meaningful period of time for the 49ers is Brunskill. He started 8 games at center for the 49ers in 2020. In that time period, he was attributed with 1 sack and I think 15 pressures, but those pressures were with Nick Mullins back there, who clearly isn't the athlete that Trey Lance is. And, I think Trey will make it easier for the offensive line to be offensive linemen just because of his ability to play in the pocket and his mobility and things of that nature. So it's not like Brunskill can't handle the job. He's played there. He's, done his job. I don't think you can just expect that extra that maybe you could get from Alex Mack. I don't think anybody necessarily thinks Brunskill is going to put together an all-pro season at center. He's just going to be good enough. Maybe not your long-term solution, but somebody that could come in there and stopgap. What I'm really more interested in seeing is because when John Lynch was talking about the center position this offseason, he pretty much said he talked about the center position like they don't necessarily need somebody who needs to be everything at center. Like they don't need somebody that could call out the reads as far as, and do the, shifts on the line and all that kind of stuff. Like they don't need somebody like that, which leads me to think maybe a person like Brendel could be the starter when they're talking about that. But when you talk about a guy like Treader, bringing him in, the one thing that he would be able to bring to the table that maybe the Brunskill or Brendel wouldn't is maybe taking some of that responsibility away from Trey Lance as far as reading the defense and making some of those audibles, at least on the offensive line. Even though Trey Lance has had some experience doing that in college, do you feel like he'd be ready to take on all of that responsibility right away? Or is that something to pay attention to as far as maybe asking him to do too much in his first year as a starter?
I do think that it is an asset that he brings. And when we remember, let's backtrack to last year. Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch did say that Trey Lance's ability to call protections, right? They alluded to that as a positive of him. And even if it's maybe too much to handle, I think they're going to trust him to do so. Alex Mack obviously would have been a huge benefit in that regard, helping Lance with that. But that's an asset that Lance provides, and I think the 49ers are going to utilize it. So I do think even if it is a tall task, at least through practice, from OTAs to training camp They're going to experiment having Lance do that and then see how it carries over to the season.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of worry, I would say, by a lot of the faithful when it comes to the offensive line. I don't know if necessarily a lot of the faithful have the same belief and trust in the offensive line than that it seems like the 49ers front office has. But for me, it's actually something I'm not too worried about, even with the loss of Alex Mack. The reason being is I think this offense, especially Kyle Shanahan, knows how important good offensive line play is for him to have a successful season with the offense. Obviously, it's a run first team, which means that offensive line has to be sound and their blocks and protection and all that kind of stuff, so that the run game could have the success that it needs to have. Obviously, they know that Trey Lance is going to be starting there, and they want to keep him healthy and upright and give him the best opportunity to have a good year. And it's not like I believe the 49ers aren't looking to win a Super Bowl this year. I do believe that everything that they're doing, they still expect and have Super Bowl aspirations. I don't look at this as like a rebuild type of year or anything like that. So I think that the 49ers really believe that they have solutions here in the offense, whether it be Brendel, whether it be Brunskill. And I think they have enough depth and youth that they believe in that could come in and still maintain this offensive line to play at a top 10 level, which they had last year as well.
Yeah, most definitely. And while top 10 might be optimistic given the uncertainty right now, right? Because we don't necessarily know, like, we anticipate Aaron Banks will play as an average starter, given how Kyle Shanahan and all have talked about him. We don't necessarily know how the interior of the offensive line will play, nor do we exactly know how Mike McGlinchey will return. So while I think the unit will still be a top 15 unit, top 16 unit, an above average unit is what I'll say. I don't know exactly where at the end of the season they'll end up ranking, just based on how they improve. Because one thing that we need to understand right now, we don't know who will start at center, be it Brunskill or be it Jake Brendel or even an outside option. So really, I think training camp is the first time where these guys are going to start to get to play with each other, especially with Mike McGlinchey back only at training camp. So it is a short time period for them to get ingrained with each other, as opposed to other offensive lines that probably have been working since OTAs began, right? So that's the one thing. It might be a slower start just because they're getting used to each other back on the offensive line. Remember last year in week 4 when they were getting used to Trey Lance, it was a pretty big struggle, right? Because the protections changed and just the way that the offensive line moved, that changed as well. You saw Trent Williams, someone who really doesn't hold as much, get called for 2 penalties. McGlinchey got called for penalties. Really, the entire offensive line struggled in that portion. And so, while I do think that it'll be a little better than obviously that start, given that they've gotten a little more used to Trey Lance over this offseason, I'm a little less bullish, I'd say, on the top 10 projection at the moment. I think you're muted, Sunil.
Thank you. We shall see. But, speaking of more, I guess, question marks when it comes to the faithful versus what the actual front office has done, I think the faithful and 49ers under Kyle Shanahan have become accustomed to 2 styles of running backs, right? The bruiser and then the change of pace type of track speed type of individual, right? We all point back to the Super Bowl run where they made it to the Super Bowl. They had a nice combination of Coleman and Breida and Mostert. And then they went into 2020 with, a similar thing with Mostert there and, Jeff Wilson Jr. and being that bruiser and, drafting a guy like Hasty. And then, they drafted Trey Sermon. Now they drafted Tyrion Davis-Price. They also have Elijah Mitchell, who was drafted last season. And they all seem to be kind of like the same player. And then you bring back a guy like Jeff Wilson, Hasty still there. And we don't know out of those 5 which actually top 4 make it. There are some other rookies that are there that may have some speed, but it doesn't look like the 49ers have necessarily put a priority on that track speed that they've had in the past with guys like Breida, guys like Mostert, that they've had so much success in this running game with. What do you attribute the 49ers as far as their bringing in the backs that they brought? Do you think they have changed their philosophy on what they're looking for from the running back position with just a plethora of what it seems like to be, the same type of back. Now you're muted.
I'll say a couple of things on that. I do think that it's somewhat of a philosophical change, right? We have Anthony Lynn now. Anthony Lynn's a guy who's liked power backs in a way, right? He's preferred that type of back, but he also finds different ways to utilize the same type of back, which is why I think these running backs are actually going to differentiate themselves. So we had Elijah Mitchell. He says he's bulking up to around I forget what he said, maybe 215 was the weight that he wanted to play with, 220. Tyrion Davis-Price, I think, bulked up to 222 to 225. Then we also have Jordan Mason, the another one of those rookies who's at 220 pounds ish or so. The other guys, Trey Sermon, I believe, slimmed down. Hasty has been pretty slim for the majority of his career, and then Jeff Wilson's also in that range as well. So there is a bit of a variety, but the top backs on the roster are power backs. However, I do think that even with the power back structure, I think that we're going to see some more receiving out of these running backs. I don't necessarily think it'll come from Tyron Davis-Price, but it could come from Jordan Mason, who reports have shown has been a pretty solid running back out of the backfield in terms of as a receiving threat. Right, he's pretty quick despite his size, and I think Elijah Mitchell will showcase some talent as well. He had a little bit of a receiving kind of role last year, but now with being fully healthy, and I think he's going to finally be able to utilize the majority of his speed, where sometimes it was limited probably last year due to all the knee injuries. I think he also might have a bit of a receiving role this upcoming season. So I think while the running backs might be the same, I think the differentiation on how they're going to be used might be a little different. But speaking philosophically, I do think Anthony Lynn has kind of changed the way just a little bit how the 49ers think. And so it's that alongside the availability. I think they prefer this type of back. You saw they targeted Tyrion Davis-Price. They drafted him earlier than expected in that third round. That's the type of back that they wanted in this draft. And so while they lost a guy like Mostert, I'm sure they believe a guy like Elijah Mitchell, while maybe not having as big of a home run speed, can somewhat replicate what Mostert did while Tyrion Davis-Price holds it down in the trenches. And now it's your turn.
We're really off this weekend, man. But that's something that I'm very interested in seeing, because I think both of us are on the same page, where I believe that maybe the lack, or I guess how well this running offense is a little bit overstated. I think they may be overrated as far as their performance last season. And the reason why I say that is when you look actually into the numbers, they average, I think, around 4.3 yards per carry as a team. 5.1, that 5.1 average of that came from Debo, who obviously isn't in the running back room. Elijah Mitchell did have pretty good. I think he was like 4.5, 4.6, 4.7. Yeah. So he obviously did very well, but the rest of the running back room really wasn't. If you take out Debo, now that whole rushing attack, just the running back room itself, is closer to 4.1 yards per carry. And then obviously a bulk of that is with Elijah Mitchell bringing it up with his 4.7. So the rest of the running backs really didn't do their job. And even though Elijah Mitchell had a great season, he did miss 6 games, and that was due to injury. I don't think that he's going to be able to carry the same type of bulk that he did last season if the 49ers want to keep him healthy and keep him, as a part of the future for the next few years. So they don't just want to run him into the ground. So the rest of this running back room has to be able to step up. I just wonder, are they capable of doing it? And is this something that, because this is going to be something new. Usually they would bring in a change of pace like we discussed. Now they're bringing in, similar type. Everybody seems to be playing at the similar type weight. They all hit the gap kind of similarly. None of them really have that much breakaway speed. So do you think that the success level of this rushing attack can, I guess, as far as the aggregate, get close to what those 2019 numbers were, where they ranked, second in the league with 140 rushing yards per game? Do you think they can do that? And can you speak to how important this rushing attack is with the way that this offense is going to run next season?
Yeah, so I mean, when we talk about 2019, that was an unprecedented year, right? Where the 49ers chose to run the football a ton. I think Garoppolo threw for, what was it, 3,800 yards or so that year, 27 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. But we ran the football a lot. And so for me, I don't necessarily know how sustainable that is for two reasons. One, it was really the first year the 49ers looked to implement that system. Defenses weren't as prepared for it, so the yards per attempt were higher, and it was a lot. It's somewhat of a more aggressive scheme in that you're looking to gain. Like that offense was about the big gains. Really, you had Mostert 5.6 yards per carry, but then Tevin Coleman with a much more average 4.1 yards per carry. Then Breida also was there with a higher yards per carry as well, near the 5 range as well. So Breida and Mostert were kind of those home run hitters, but you also had Tevin Coleman kind of carrying it down. Now, with I think the problem last year was the injuries, right? I think that last year was a little bit of a deviation from what we expect because there were so many injuries. Not many, the running back depth wasn't necessarily there, so the yards per carry probably went down. Now with adequate depth, I think we have Tyrion Davis-Price that can hold it down for a significant amount of carries. I think Elijah Mitchell, now healthy, can hold it down for a significant amount of carries, like he showed last year. Like Elijah Mitchell played 10 games and he had 207 carries. That's a ton for a 49er back, and it was only in 10 games. He averaged nearly 96, I think it was 96.3 yards per game when he was playing. So he definitely had he showed out fairly well when he was playing. Not 96, I think it was 87. But regardless, Mitchell showed out when he was healthy. Now with a complementary back that can carry a ton of the load, I think the yards per carry does go up just because they're more efficient. And also, it utilizes the other guys well because they don't necessarily have to be thrust in the spotlight in more than a situational role where they thrive in certain situations. That's how I'm looking at it right now. Do I think they're going to reach the rushing totals of 2019? No, I think they throw the ball more. And while they might not throw for a significantly amount more attempts, I think the yards per attempt is going to be more just due to Trey Lance being able to stretch the field and the situations the 49ers are going to be in offensively. So I don't necessarily think we're going to reach the rushing totals that we did in 2019. However, one thing that does lead an offense in that way is a suffocating defense, right? If your defense isn't on the field for that long, and if you aren't having necessarily super long drives, you can obviously be a high-powered offense. Last year, the 49ers were on the field for a significant amount of time offensively due to long drives, right? You saw in week 10, how did we beat the Rams with these 11-minute drives, with these 15-minute drives, not 15, sorry, 8-minute drives, 11-minute drives, those type of things. But if we can be a little more efficient offensively, not as long drives, but also be as suffocating defensively, then we have a chance, I think, of reaching those type of totals.
Yeah, and I mean, not to take it off the running game. I just want to stay kind of there. I mean, I think it's going to be more important this year than maybe last year because of Trey Lance starting there. I think that obviously his strength is the play action pass. If the rushing attack isn't effective, it takes away really that ability to have the play action. I mean, clearly his arm is going to open up some space. They can't just put 8 in the box and just protect. The defenses can't just focus on just stopping the run because they do have a threat with the arm as far as with Trey, which is going to make it easier for that rushing attack to have some success. I just wonder, my question to you is, do you feel like the rushing attack can be limited to these running backs, or are they going to have to get the wide receivers involved, whether it be Debo or whether it be Ray McLeod, to come in and be that explosion out of the rushing attack? Because I don't know if that's how Shanahan wants to do it, right? That was kind of like a last ditch effort mid-season when the offense was just sputtering. It seems, I don't know if that's something he wants to do long term, or even if the wide receivers want to play in that type of role. Do you trust that this running backs room is good enough to be what the 49ers need for them to be this year to have like a successful season?
I'll say yes and no. And the reason is I think the running back group is capable of that. but I don't think it's going to be limited to just running backs. We saw the immense value that Deebo Samuel provided out of the backfield last year. I don't think you can just shy away from it and not give him any carries. I think that that's a significant portion of his profile, and that's a way that he provides value as another power back with extreme acceleration. Additionally, Ray McLeod showcased how he could play getting carries out of the backfield. I'm not saying carries, but I'm saying pitches, end arounds, those type of carries, which Deebo Samuel did get in 2019. It's not like Deebo Samuel didn't have the rushing capability. He rushed 14 times for 159 yards back in 2019, his rookie season. So it was somewhat in him. And I think Ray McLeod could get a similar role. Now, is it going to be of high, like extremely high volume? I don't necessarily think so. I don't think it eclipses more than maybe 75 rushes in that way. But I do think that, like going back to the running backs, I do think that they have the capability to do so. Why? Because we have two guys who've proven that they can carry a big load. Elijah Mitchell, despite getting injured a ton last year, still carried the ball 207 times, like I said. Tyrone Davis Price, his goal is to carry the ball a ton. I think he has the ability to do so. And then we have Jeff Wilson Jr., who's now fully healthy off the torn meniscus, back on a 1 year deal. He can be reliable as well. He's carried the ball 126 times back in 2020. So he has the capability to carry a ton of volume. And then whoever that fourth running back will be it Hasty, be it Sermon, I do think that the fresh legs that they have will still provide that, or will still prove that they can also carry the ball in a limited extent as well. So I think that we have the ability to not be as injured last year. I think our depth and the quality of depth is better, which is why the run game should be better this year.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be important. So hopefully your words hold true. And you mentioned, along with the rushing attack, what's going to help this team be successful is a smothering defense. And we are going into year 2 of D'Amico Ryans as the defensive coordinator. Obviously the biggest news this offseason for him was him turning down a second interview with a head coaching interview with the Minnesota Vikings. In his offseason interviews, he's mentioned that he just felt the need to come back and develop for another year, and that position may not be the best fit for him and his family, moving forward. So clearly he has goals and aspirations this year to build on the success that he had from last year. Most of us believe that this is probably his last year with the 49ers, as long as he accomplishes what he expects to accomplish this season. But what do you expect from year 2 of D'Amico Ryans? And are there any big, changes or scheme changes? What do you feel like that next step in the next evolution of what we see from D'Amico Ryans is this upcoming season?
Yeah, so if we talk about scheme changes, right, I think cover one man is going to be a lot more utilized for the 49ers. Last year, I think they tried to implement the situation or the scheme early in the year when they had Verrett because they had two lockdown corners and Verrett and Mosley on the outside. However, Verrett obviously tore his ACL. They couldn't sustain that with the quality of cornerbacks that they had, so they had to change their scheme. However, with two guys with Charvarius Ward and Manuel Mosley on the outside, I think that that's lockdown. I think they have the ability to be man-to-man corners. At least that's what their build is. And then when we look at Ambry Thomas as well, I think he was drafted to be a man-to-man corner as well. I think he suits best in the press. Cover one man allows one safety in the box as well, one overhang. And I think Jimmy Ward has proven that he can be that overhead safety with Talanoa Hufanga and his instincts suiting well in the box. So I think that this scheme is better suited for this defense. And then if you want Jimmy Ward in the box, you got a guy like George Odom who can be a situational pass coverage guy out there, or even Dante Johnson, who we've seen being thrown out there at the safety position before, and he's taken his majority of his reps at free safety this this offseason in OTAs. So I think that there's going to be that type of a schematic change. I'm very interested to see, do they start putting cornerbacks on an island, or do they keep moving cornerbacks? Or sorry, not do they keep? Do they start moving cornerbacks to tail the best receiver? Charvarius Ward was paid big time money. I want to see, will he cover DK Metcalf? Will he cover DeAndre Hopkins? Will he shadow certain receivers, or will he stick to one side of the field? Now, other things, one thing that is just in a way a personal thing that I want to see from D'Amico Ryan's linebacker. We have a ton of young linebackers right now on top of our top three. I want to first see, can our linebacker room be a top three linebacker room in the entirety of the NFL? Because I think there's a capability to doing so with Alshire and Greenlaw likely staying with the team for 2022, alongside obviously Fred Warner, who's been an all pro. But additionally, we have Demetrius Flangenfeld, Oren Burks. Can he get the most out of those players in situational situations? And he also, in practice, can he develop guys like Jeremiah Gemmel? Can he develop guys like Segun Olabi? Can he develop guys like Marcelo McCrary Ball and all these undrafted linebackers, whoever makes the practice squad or even the 53-man roster? Can he develop some of these players to be key contributors in the future when some of these other guys that are in the rotation now potentially leave?
Yeah, I mean, that question I think is easily answered. The answer would probably be yes, because we've seen him have so much success developing the guys that you just mentioned as far as the top three. Obviously Fred Warner wasn't a first or second round draft pick. He was drafted in the third round and, was able to be developed into an all pro very early into his career. Same with Dre Greenlaw and Aziz Al-Shaair, guys that were drafted later. Aziz wasn't even drafted. And they've been able to be developed into very productive players that would be are outplaying where they were drafted or selected as well. So I think that that's going to be key. I do like that you brought up the linebackers, because I do think that they may have to play a different type of role in this defense, because for everything that DeMeco Ryans did last season, the biggest thing that really didn't have that much of a solution, or the one question that he wasn't really able to answer, was the lack of ability to stop the run. The 49ers were gashed quite a bit in the run all throughout the season by different teams. And I think that the linebackers getting involved is going to be kind of how that solution is. And because of the level of cornerbacks now that DeMeco Ryans has, I think that maybe these linebackers aren't going to be dropped into coverage as much, and maybe they're going to be playing closer to the line for either putting pressure on the quarterback or being able to stop the outside runs, and even sometimes down the middle that really phased the 49ers a lot this past season. So I think that that's the iteration or the evolution that I want to see. We've obviously seen his ability to, scheme stuff to keep the opposing offenses questioning what is actually happening. We've seen him grow and elevate in his ability to control the game and play at a high level, or have his defense playing at a high level, especially the win streak that they went on. Now, are they going to be able to stop the run? Because that was the thing that we really didn't see him be able to come up with a solution that consistently worked. So that's what I'm really looking forward to, as far as what's the next step for DeMeco Ryans. Can he stop the run now, and what he does to actually do that?
I was actually fairly impressed with his adjustment last year from first half to second half, specifically sliding Armstead in to be a guy on the interior for the majority of the time. I thought that was fairly impressive of an adjustment, which helped the run become, or helped the defense become one of the better run defenses in the NFL. I'll give you another situation that I think he could improve, and I expect it to happen with the caliber of team that we have on defense now. Third down conversions. I think last year that was one bit of a struggle where we couldn't get off the field on third downs in certain situations, extended games, and potentially even lost us games. Although offensive fallacies were probably more to blame in certain games. But third down situations, obviously, if you get off the field quicker, puts less pressure on your offense, and it also eases fatigue, right? And so I think that is something I want to see DeMeco Ryans improve on. I think he definitely can, because of the caliber of team. They're going to allow him to play man. They're going to allow him to stack people in the box at times. They're going to allow him to play in cover 4, cover 5, maybe even sometimes, cover 4, cover 6, where we drop a ton of guys back in third down situations as well. I want to see those adjustments, and I want to see players respond in a good way as well. But overall, obviously, we're very impressed by DeMeco Ryans. I expect him to get some more head coaching candidacy interviews next year. And yeah, that's kind of what I have to say.
Yeah. And I mean, the third down, I think having better corners is actually going to help that as well, because for a lot of those third downs, at least maybe this is feelings over facts, but it seems like a lot of those were penalties in the secondary that led to the defenses or offenses being able to stay on the on the field when the defense had done enough through first and second down to really put them in a bad situation. So that is going to be something that is going to be interesting for the 49ers. I mean, they did, I'm looking back at the stats, they did rank top 10 as far as rushing attacks. I just, for some reason, remember the games that they lost really
In the
that.
first half, definitely, where we were giving up 100 yards consistently, right in that first half of the first half of the season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, just maybe not overall through season, but it seems like the games that were lost, the rushing attack really was what kind of caused it, as well as inability to stop people in the slot. So those are the two things. I mean, obviously the slot corner is going to play a big. We're looking at training camp to really see who's going to emerge there, whether it's Denard or Johnson or Womack or somebody we aren't thinking about that could play in that role. Yeah, I mean, I think that obviously D'Amico Ryans has ambition to be a head coach. He has to maintain, if not elevate, to be able to be in that next round of coaching for the 49 or for a head coaching job next offseason. So it is going to be interesting to see what he does bring to the game. Another thing that Rohan I would like to see is more turnovers. So how he can scheme up to be able to put his players in positions to get more fumbles, more interceptions, and more tackle for losses and sacks and stuff like that. So just to become more opportunistic defense, I think is going to be important to see if D'Amico could bring that out of his defense. Because I think from last year to this year, as far as the talent level, I would say that this year's talent level is actually better than last year's talent level. So now it's like, okay, well, if the talent is better, what are you going to do as a coach to make sure that the performance is better as well?
Yeah. I think the talent is better, right? When you look at it, where did we lose? We lost DJ Jones. We lost K1 Williams. DJ Jones, obviously, his replacement was already on the team, Javon Kinlaw. I think they anticipated that DJ Jones probably wasn't back last year. Somehow we're able to sign him because of the COVID season to a 1-year deal. But now that Kinlaw's fully healthy, or anticipating to be fully healthy, I think he slots in there. And they signed a plethora of guys as well. K1 Williams, that slot corner, is still a situation that has to be handled. But the 49ers have ample bodies at cornerback to compete. We'll see who ends up winning the position. And like you said, that slot corner is going to have a tough task ahead of them because of the amount of good receivers that the 49ers will face out of the slot, like Cooper Kupp that they faced last year. So defending receivers in that slot is going to be a difficult idea for the 49ers that they have to find a way to stop as well.
I love it. And obviously, it seems like the biggest push or the biggest, I guess, position group or phase of the game that the 49ers isolated as an issue this offseason was special teams. Most of their early additions in free agency were special team aces. Obviously, Ray McLeod, Oren Burks, and so on and so forth. Even some of the players that they brought back from last year's team, like a Jordan Willis, is somebody who also shined in special teams as well. So that's clearly something that was a position of weakness for the 49ers last season. They switched coaches. They brought in, a longtime coach for the Seahawks as a new special teams coordinator. And then obviously all the additions they made in the offseason. So based off of what the 49ers have done, Rohan, what are the immediate changes that you think you will see from the special teams right off the bat?
Yeah, I mean, just straight up, I believe the unit should be better this year, right? When you look at it from last season, the special teams unit sucked. We were a bottom 5, bottom 10 unit in the NFL, and it cost us games. You see the Seattle game back in week 4, we had a muff punt or muff kick return, and really the transition of the game to the in favor of Seattle was because of special teams. And then in the week 13 game against Seattle as well, I think special teams played a huge part of that loss, right? Another muff kick. So really, I think this new unit with the new players that we've had, we've made a significant investment into special teams. You talked about Ray McLeod. You talked about Oren Burks. There's also George Odom. We didn't improve just one facet. We improved the return part of the game. We improved our gunners. We also improved our tackling. So I think all three facets are important. I think the immediate changes we're going to see are schematically with Brian Schneider. I think we're going to be put in a better position to get better field position, as well as to it's kind of on both sides, right? You have to get your opponents having worse field position, which is improved by the gunners and the tacklers, and you also have to get better position yourself, improved by the receivers, right? So I think it's a two way fold. I think we improve on both sides. And I think we probably end up with an about average special teams unit as compared to 27th last year.
Yeah, and I think that when you look at the issues or the deficiencies, it's one thing to say, that the special teams finished 27th. It's another thing to realize how that 27th ranked special teams defense um, led to attributed to so many losses that the 49ers actually had. And obviously the Seattle game, it shows because there was a muff punt and things like that, which are just blatant reasons why the team lost. But starting field position plays a big role in how the 49ers can compete as well. They lost 7 times last year. 5 of those losses were within 1 score. So when you talk about starting field position, which I think they were ranked 26th in starting field position with their average starting field position somewhere around the 26, 27 yard line. Even if you get like a 10-yard change, now all of a sudden that's an extra first down, which now maybe that drive, instead of ending in a punt, ends in field goal range. Now those drives that ended up with a short field goal, maybe they punch it in for a touchdown, and now that's how you flip one score games to now being the victor on that versus coming out the defeated. So that's where I really want to see a big impact, right? The field position is clearly one that I think is going to be important, and I think special teams is one aspect of that is going to help that. Also, what we talked about in the last segment, the opportunistic defense, being able to get some turnovers to keep the field short for a guy like Trey Lance in the offense to be able to be impactful and just score a lot of points. So that's where I want to see the immediate change. I do expect that with the amount of emphasis that they put, we will see some good things from the special teams.
Yeah, and I want to say one other thing, right? What another, like, it might not be an immediate change, but one thing the 49ers have also done to address special teams, they just brought in a ton of bodies that could potentially play special teams at positions, right? Like, let's just talk real quick about the receivers. That 6th receiver, we don't know who it's going to be, but it could be a guy on special teams, right? It could be a guy who's specifically like brought on the roster to compete on special teams, like a Malik Turner or a guy with experience like that. Cornerback, I think it's a similar situation, right? You had De'Amar Lenore and guys like that play special teams last year. You might, if one of those guys is relegated to a starter role, you might need another person in place to be a better special teams player. And so I think that's another thing that they've done in terms of the changes is just adding bodies that they believe can compete on that realm rather than like overlooking it in a way, which was an issue last year.
Sure. And like you mentioned, adding bodies through the draft, young, athletic guys that are corners, receivers, secondary guys that are known as like the athletes in the NFL, bringing in a lot of those guys that maybe their only opportunity to make the team is on special teams. So that is a good sign to see. I know this isn't one of the questions, but I know you like the random spontaneous, but what for the 49ers, because I think the biggest thing that is going to lead to their success or not is being able to win these very close games, right? Like I said, 5 losses of their 7 losses were within 1 score. What is the main component that you feel like the 49ers need to fix from last season to be able for these close games to actually turn into victories versus losses? Because the difference between a number 1 home field advantage throughout the playoffs and being in a divisional game, maybe even not even in the playoffs, could be the matter of 1 or 2 games here with how competitive the NFC is. What do you think is going to be the biggest thing that the 49ers need to change from last season to make sure that they could win some of these close matchups?
Yeah, I mean, when we look at the 49ers wins, right, let's just go real quick top to bottom. Detroit was an 8-point win, 41-33, but Detroit, that game was really out of hand. They just scored a bunch of points in the fourth quarter. I think that was a blowout. Philly was a close game, 6-point game. Chicago, though, 10-point plus win. Los Angeles in week 10 was, I believe, 30-10, 20-point win. or 31-10, and then Jacksonville was 30-10, another 20-point win. Minnesota was an 8-point game, right? And then Atlanta and Houston, those were the other two 10-plus point wins. So they had a ton of 10-plus point wins, not necessarily the opposite way around. I think they only lost 2 games out of their, how many losses they had last year? 7?
7. Yeah.
Yeah. 2
Two
of
were
their 7.
blowouts. The one in Seattle and Arizona.
Exactly. So really, when we look at the game, they were winning by a significant margin when they won, and they were losing by a close option when they lost. It's really playing football consistently for 48 or for 60 minutes. That's something that they struggled to do last year. I think they had one quarter in a way where they faltered, or one half. You saw a lot of games where the 49ers struggled maybe in the first half. I'm specifically talking about Green Bay, where we just scored 7 points barely at the very end of the half with the Trey Lance touchdown to make it 17-7, but then flourish in the second half, or vice versa in certain games, right? So I think it's really consistency that matters, because at times they're playing really well in the beginning, right? We saw against Tennessee where we thought it could have been like a 21-28 game in the first quarter, first half, but then we end up losing that game 2017 because of the amount of mistakes that we made. Now, one thing that Jimmy Garoppolo brought to this team was the ability to play in the clutch, right? He didn't necessarily play in the other 43 minutes, but in those last 15, 20 minutes, right? He played in the clutch pretty well at times, right? A lot of game-winning drives, a lot of game-closing drives that force the other team to score to win. Now, that type of success might need to be replicated in other ways, because we haven't necessarily seen how Trey Lance will do in those situations. Although the like really what we've seen doesn't necessarily indicate that he won't participate in that. But it's playing your heart out for 60 minutes rather than playing it out for 30 maybe, and being consistent throughout. When you have a lead, you got to maintain that lead. I know you talked about earlier in a previous stream how one thing that you had against Kyle Shanahan was just the inability to keep leads. I think he needs to be able to keep those leads, not only in the playoffs and in key situations, but also in the regular season, because these games matter, especially this year, where one game might be the deficit between a playoff like a playoff exit and also making the playoffs, right? So that's kind of my way of looking at it. You got to play well for 60 minutes, and you got to make sure you keep the leads when you have them, because the 49ers, I think, probably had a lead in I think 15 of their 17 games they had a lead, but obviously they only won 10 of those.
Yeah, and 49ers throwback, one of the community's favorite guys, because he's retweeting all of our videos. So appreciate you for joining the stream and everything you do for us, my man. Sunil, my opinion would be score points and convert on third downs. We ranked 25th on third downs last season. I mean, absolutely. That was something you mentioned earlier as well, Rohan. That's clearly going to be something that's important. For me, I really want to see execution in the first half. I know we've talked about it previously, Rohan, as far as the basic inability for the 49ers to consistently put up points in the first half, and especially in the first quarter as well. Like, I think they averaged something like 11 points for the first half. And if you took out, some of the games where they really played well in the first half, it's even lower than that. And so execution in the first quarter is going to be important. I want to see the 49ers play with a lead a lot more than having to come back, because if you can turn the opposing offense one-dimensional, especially where they're going to have to play catch-up and throw the ball a lot more, I think that plays into the hands of how the 49ers could be really dominant this season, because of how much depth and talent there is along the defensive line. So if they could turn into just a pass rushing attack, now our strength, which is the corners and the defensive line, can now play at their maximum and really turn into a very scary team for any offense to have to deal with if they're playing from behind. So that's what I really think is the biggest issue, Rohan, as far as just executing in the first quarter, making sure they're going into half with a significant lead, so that the second half can be really turning teams into one-dimensional as often as possible.
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair. I think that if like that leads in a way to the consistency point, right? We got to be you got to be consistent. You got to be putting points up, and we really just can't let.
Thanks, Angie, by the way.
We just can't get our foot off the gas, right? I'll just point to one other point or one other instance last year, right? 17-14, we're up in the NFC Championship game, and we were predictable on offense. We couldn't move the ball for 2 straight drives. Los Angeles ends up scoring. I understand that Tart dropped the interception, but I don't care. We had the lead with 10 minutes left, and we had multiple drives to put that game away, and we just couldn't score. We couldn't move the ball at all, and we struggled offensively because we were predictable. I think that that's something that needs to change. We need to make sure that we can hold those leads, and we need to make sure we keep our foot on the gas to make sure opponents are at bay.
Yeah. And you mentioned last year, we all saw what happened 2019 Super Bowl as well, up 10 points going into the fourth and clearly couldn't hold that lead, which obviously would have changed the whole dynamic of how people look at Shanahan and this 49ers team. So, I mean, we mentioned a lot of stuff, Rohan. Obviously, there's still a lot. I mean, on paper is one thing, but being able to execute is different. I think we're both on the same page. I think the 49ers have the talent to be able to make these changes. Now it's about the execution and their ability to actually make it look good on Sundays. So, yeah, man, great show. Thank you so much to the guys that are in the chat for joining us. I mean, I want to shout out Andrew once again. I really like this. Me and Rohan really enjoy working together, so I appreciate that you guys like it as well.
Oh,
I don't know if we're ever going to be able to go viral. That's just not in our personalities to be able to do that kind of stuff. But how you can help us out, Andrew, tell your friends, tell the rest of the community, retweet our videos, make sure people know about when we are going live together, whether it be on his channel or my channel. We really appreciate it. And we appreciate that, you enjoy the content that we're creating as well. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Ron.
Nah, I just wanted to say thank you to Andrew as well, and really the rest of the guys that are in the chat. I saw Amin in here. I saw Carcast in here. I saw Kimberly in here. Steve, 49ers Throwback, always. Thank you all for tuning in. It really just means the world. It's Sunday. We're just hours away from Warriors basketball, where I know Sunil isn't necessarily a big fan, but I'm definitely into that game. But thank you guys so much. Sunil, as always, thank you for bringing me on. Great show, and we will catch you guys not this upcoming week, but we'll catch you guys next week.
Yeah, what do you got going on for the rest of the week? Do you know kind of your schedule for content this week?
I do not know at the moment. Like, I am going to LA for the week, so we will figure out when I'm streaming, if I do plan to stream this week at all. If not, I will resume when I return for a short period of time before I head out for orientation for a couple of days.
Nice, man. A lot of fun stuff going on in your life. I mean, I'm a diehard Laker fan, so this is like the worst finals for me to have to watch because it's Celtics and Golden State. Both are rivals of the team. However, I have to say these two teams are the most likable iterations of the teams that are there. So I'm not too mad at it. I think it's actually a very exciting NBA Finals. I'm tuned into every single game. Definitely, it is the future of the sport, these up and down teams, right? It's not like the Shaq and Kobe Lakers anymore. So it's going to be fun to watch. I know most of you guys will be tuning in to the Warriors. So I will say good luck to your team. Wayne Breezy is a brother of both of ours. He's a Celtics fan. So I'm also going to say good luck to the Celtics and Wayne Breezy. But yeah, thank you guys so much for tuning in. This upcoming week for me, I know Tuesday I'm on with Jack on his channel, and then also Jesse in the evenings as well. I'm going to probably do another roundtable or something on Wednesday. And then we'll see if I pop in, if any breaking news for the rest of the week. But appreciate you guys for coming in. Like I say, stay safe, stay hydrated. And like always, we will talk again very, very soon. Take care, guys.